Hey guys, it's Thorin, also known as 944. Don't forget Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be Masternook, who is an old school North American Counter-Strike player from CS 1.6. Now, I'm going to skip back sort of to the beginning, because here's the thing. I'm not as interested in, like, how people got into games, but I am sometimes interested in the players where I don't know how they got to the invite level. So in your case in particular, I'm going to reference something I actually referenced recently when I did one of these interviews with Fair, which was, even though, listen, I never reveal like private stuff, but I know this wasn't a big deal. Like, basically, I told this story about how back in the day, it was only like 4 years ago or something, I did some like video, and I just referenced something about, like, I can't remember if it was an article about Rival or something like that. And even though I was actually quite fucking positive considering I'm European, you did message me and you were basically salty. Like, you didn't sort of like explain how much I dominated all the fucking SoCal LANs. I was banned. You have to understand, like, I couldn't even attend the LANs. Like, so my question is this, right? I didn't know back then, and especially if people don't know the lay of the land in North America. In North America, there was a couple of hub spots that had like LAN area. Like, obviously Texas had the CPLs. New York had its own little LAN cafes. Aside from that, though, unless you knew about SoCal LANs, essentially, and even NorCal as well, people didn't understand there was a LAN cafe culture. They thought basically until you become online in invite level play, you're nobody. You must just be a bomb player. You're some guy trying to go through main. Right? In your case, were you already playing at the LANs and then you became like someone becoming a pro and trying to go to the invite level? Were you at the level and then you started going to the LANs? What was this story about the SoCal LAN aspect in that sense?
Yeah, so the SoCal LANs, honestly, I feel like we're like America's #1 breeding ground for like top players. There was a lot of just people that would get hard stuck Cal-M, but they would attend the SoCal LANs, and everyone here knew that they were just like, like demons. They were just, you didn't want to run into them, even though they were like Cal-M players. That's just not someone you want to run into. But I mean, the SoCal LAN scene was crazy. I mean, for a while, WEW, they ran it, and then after WEW ran it, GX ran it, and then after that, their time, it was like just rival time and ascension time.
Yes.
We would go to. I definitely didn't start off winning. Like, I would just go to every SoCal LAN possible with Ascension, and we would just lose. We would just show up just knowing that GX would be there, but we would, that'd be our hope. Like, oh, GX is gonna be there. We're gonna let's try to get 6-7 rounds off them, and we just had like that grinder mentality of like, okay, let's just go and just and then eventually we just started beating them, and that was that. SoCal really had a grinder mentality. It was just like its own little, like you said, its own little hub, its own little like community of people that would just go there every weekend knowing that they would lose, but they were there to get better.
Right, obviously, I will get, even though I'm the esports historian, I'm actually quite famous for having a good memory, etc. It goes without saying, I can't remember every detail of people's lives and careers. So I will say on some of this, feel free to correct me if I get the timeline wrong or the characterizations wrong. But basically, at the beginning of your career, the first time I remember seeing you around the invite level was the actual team. What am I actually thinking? Because here's the problem, in my brain at least, dude. I think it was Rival, right? Was the first team in Cal Invite, right? Wasn't it later that you actually, or was Ascension before that? Was Ascension like a low-level Cal Invite team before Rival?
Yeah, Ascension was like the first really low-level team that I started grinding with. The only good players it really had, I think that we won Cal-M. Destructo was in it, yeah.
I remember watching his POVs. He was the only player I knew. He was mega.
Oh yeah, he was definitely a demon back then. Our Cal-M team that won, I think, was like Cynical, myself, Destructo, Madrano, and Wins, who was, people thought he was pretty suspect then, but he went to all the LANs with us. After we won Cal-M, our first Cal-I match was against Rival, who were the Cal-I champions, and we played them and we beat them pretty bad on Prodigy, I remember. And I still remember Nick McDermott, a good buddy of mine right now. He messaged me after, he's like, "Why the F are you so good online, but you suck on LAN? I can't wait to see you and beat your ass on LAN." It's just, that was, of course, if people don't know, people were much more shit talking, much more in your face. This is almost a we're going to fight if you beat us online and can't do it online type of thing.
Because the interesting detail that, funnily enough, a lot of people won't know, they wouldn't even actually have known it from my favourite interview, because basically he was only in the good rival when they were the fucking amazing team coming third at the World Championships, is people won't get it. They actually rivaled the team, made a terrible name for themselves, because as you say, they won invite online, and then they famously went to the next CPL and came something mental like 25th or something, dude. Like, they weren't even relevant. And so the joke is, those players, despite the fact that even some of them, obviously from the West Coast, like, they bombed online. Like, dude, they were like, it's like they were onliners. And in fact, obviously, the guy you're talking about, who, if people don't know, we'll get into that later, but he himself even, like, they were all like people where, like, they were known people in the community. Like, they weren't supposed to just be guys who'd flunk on LAN, and the whole ego was based around the idea, like, we're LAN players at heart, right? So when you joined this team, like, was it one of those ones where it's like, because I know when you join like Invite, part of it is it's politics, isn't it? It's like, even if the team's not good, you want the name of the team, and then if there's one good player still there, you want to play with him, and then you kick the others out, and it's like, people don't know the drama. So when you actually were coming into the rival team, this was after the other period, right, where it was like you were like, so you were in the Ascension team, then you played this, but weren't you in the Forsaken team before you joined Rival officially, right?
No, Rival was my first CPL, 2003, I believe. It was. There we
go, because this is my. Oh, there we go. I've got it now. I was one CPL short. This is the question then. Okay, that's I set it up, but I failed the landing there. The question was this: all the others, as far as I know, the other famous ones, except maybe Exodus. You can correct me on this. It was basically the ones who were on the onliners. You initially joined their team, right? And then the idea is you also went to one of the not great CPLs with them. And then after that, people are thinking of a totally different rival because it's all like zero reality people who come in later, right? So you basically were with the guys, like you talk about McDermott, who were kind of like, they'd had their failures, right? What was this era of the team like, by the way? By the way, did they actually sort of behind closed doors acknowledge they flunked on LAN?
They didn't flunk on LAN, they flunked at CPLs. They were, there was...
Oh, that's what I meant, sure.
There used to be a meme that... The rival curse, where there was the huge, I don't know if you remember that.
They would win the lethal gamers, yes. They would always dominate that shit and then bomb the LAN, right? Yeah, sure.
Exactly. We would just go and just dominate every time at the LAN, and just, that was just always the rival curse. I believe we got first or second at the LG that, and that had all the teams, that had all the European teams would come in boot camp there, like all the Texas teams, and you like had to like get a spot, and it was crazy. And I don't know if you remember, that's where the famous, you remember Amic?
Yes.
Where McDermott or Shad stole his fan and just ripped it out at the LG boot camp. Yeah, lots of good memes from that.
There's so many, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so no, but in lines of like I'm saying, like, okay, so you sort of characterize it there. They did know it. They knew that, like, look, we're good on LAN. Essentially, then the implication is you just choke under pressure, then, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that was that team, and after that team, we messed up at that LAN. We had like Exile, like our team online was, Exile was for DOP, and it was crazy. After that team choked, I remember McDermott and Gary Sanchez and a couple of other guys were like, oh, we all did so good. We need to make a way for NA to come back, and so they wanted to make like a quote unquote super team with myself, McDermott, Cripple, Insane G, and maybe Ice Salmon. But
could be. I think it was. I think Ice Salmon was on the team. Yeah.
But I had my other plans because I was doing pretty well on LAN in the SoCal scene with the young kids, with Destructo,
Medias,
Medias, of course. Yeah.
All the other members of the team, basically. Eventually, one day.
Yeah. So eventually, we were like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make. I think we made. After that, I think, guys, when I made the team, Zero Respect, ZR.
There you go, Zero Respect, sorry, yes. Yeah.
And that was really when we started popping off. After that, we came back home and started just grinding the SoCal scene again, and we were just untouchable. The LANs that started being like like I was saying, the SoCal scene where it was GX would win everything, they were banned for like half a year, where they banned them because they just won everyone. Like a couple of teams stopped coming. And then we started winning everything, and they let GX back, and then we still continue to win everything. It'd be back and forth. We wouldn't win everything.
Okay.
It's like back and forth. Yeah.
Here's my question then, and obviously, look, it's a bit of an easy question to potentially dodge. So it's up to you if you want to be honest, or if I'm off base, right? When you were in the rival that were the ones that choked the CPL, did you ever have the question yourself, like, did I also choke it? Like, was it just those guys? Did I join like a team that was sort of tainted, or did I also a choker at that time? Did you ever? What did you think of that? How do you characterize it?
No, I actually, I was actually nuts at CPL. So I remember playing really well on Dust 2. I popped off. The pre CPL, I really popped off. I actually remember DKT was behind me, and he was like, "Wow, if I had this kid's aim in my brain,
Okay, yeah, of course.
there'd be no stopping me."
One of the all-time great characters, by the way. If people don't know.
Yeah, love DKT.
For sure.
But yeah, I mean, I really popped off, and like you said, all the big names and like let's make a super team with me and you around. So my ego kind of skyrocketed after that. I did kind of well, and after that, I feel like that's where the whole me and my ego started, like, coming together as a whole, where I became the Masternook of,
Because then this really weird scenario happened, which we're going to explain in parts, but I'll briefly address initially here, because this part I do remember, which is after this, the next team, funnily enough, this is obviously where the story began when I did my Fear Reflections, is Forsaken, where you join up with, funnily enough, ironically, a bunch of other people that have had problems at CPLs, like Warden obviously fucked at Green Berets and came last or whatever. Everyone remembers, like, if people don't know, fucking Storm famously went to a CPL when he was, like, amazing in main, but, like, didn't understand what fucking acceleration was and just had it on his PC the whole time, and everyone was like, "Oh, he obviously cheats," like, 'cause he just had like 0 kills or whatever. And then the idea was it was like all the losers sort of banded together, but they were really skilled players. Like, for example, people like Fear, like, everyone knew he was good, but he was just off in like side teams, So this is where it's going to get complicated, because we're going to go team by team, but I'm just going to set the premise. This is a scenario I've never heard of with any other scenario, because basically, spoiler, this is how the story goes. They make this team Forsaken, and it actually even has more than 5 players. It even had bloody Fatality playing sometimes in it. There's all these names in it, right? And then they're playing online, and eventually they go to a CPL, and they even come top 12. But at the exact same time, this is all going on, you're playing with that LAN team at the same time at the LANs with the other guys who aren't in this team. And the joke is, eventually, even though this team actually had a lot of promise, you actually went and chose the other team. So give me the Forsaken story. Like, was it Warden who brought you in? How did this team come about?
No, for some reason we got in touch with Funk. Funk was actually after the rival team.
Funk, yes.
And ZR, we made Ascension, the online team. We came back to Ascension, and Funk joined that for a while. And it was a team with like Kimber, Funk, and some other people. And Funk eventually, because we knew that the ZR people couldn't play at CPL, and that's like the dream to everyone is go to CPL. There's no other competition. There's just CPL. So after we're like, okay, we're going to join Forsaken. It's going to be the people you said, and we even, like you said, with Tyler, Storm. Obviously, Tyler and Warden, amazing players. But we used to joke around with Tyler about how he cheated online and how he's just like, we used to just, because he was very sus. He was a very sus person. Everyone thought so. And like we would just joke about him, and Funk would just be like, "Come on, man, he's just a really good player. Just give him a chance." And after playing with him, like Storm, amazing. Obviously, I mean, they went and did big things. But we placed the CPL, got like 9 to 12 or something.
Could have been way higher as well. People don't know, like, the losses were like close games. You were playing the best teams in the world. That could have been like a top 8 placing, right?
No, we lost in overtime to NOA, I believe.
Yes. There you go. I think Inferno, maybe, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and then we lost to
maybe 4 Kings.
4 Kings.
There you
go.
Because
I remember on Aztec, because I remember Fear popped off like really, really hard that match. He won like a 4v1, like a 3v1. But after that, I actually wanted to, knowing that I was going to go back and make the ZR team with Destructo, Haynes, Medius. There was actually thoughts of continuing the team, because like I said, even though we got 9 to 12, I thought like the team, I was like, wow, we could be world beaters with this team, even if we just replaced a couple people. But Funk at the time, he was a crafty guy, He told me like, oh, hey Mark, Warden wanted to, was talking about replacing you and doing all this thing, and I was a pretty childish guy back then, and just believed him. It's like, oh, if Warden's going to cut me, then I have to cut him. Okay. And that's actually one of my biggest regrets, because I really love Warden. And
he's
Storm.
Cool guy.
Yeah, so that was biggest regrets definitely in my career, was just believing Funk and his wordsmithing.
He was very good he was like Littlefinger out of Game of Thrones, if people don't know, except not as good at it. But like whatever, he gave it his best. He tried.
Yeah, I mean, he was a good player. I got no problem. Like overall, even all the stuff people give him, he was an amazing player. I still, to this day, I like quote stuff. I coach some teams in Valorant. I quote from him for every now and then, because he had some good quotes.
Definitely knew something about running teams, right? That people didn't back then, actually. There's very few people sort of knew how to be the captain of a team, right?
Yeah, 100%. And he was a very strategic mind, good player overall. And like you said, even but there was a time during the pre-CPL where we had Fatality playing with us. And I wanted Fatality to sit in some of the maps, and like, he Littlefinger, David's like, oh no, there's no. And he even called,
because it would have been instead of Funk, I'm guessing, right? Something like that.
Yeah, and I wanted this to happen, and I even called like Stuart Holden on the phone, who was part of Forsaken but didn't come to CPL. And Stu was like, "Man, you can't just replace Funk like that; it'll kill him. You know, he'll never be the same person again." So I was like, "Ah, okay, we just gotta just play on," and we played good. So I mean.
By the way, since it was always something people wondered about at the time, like, look, when people ask, like, was Fatality good? Usually they're not actually asking that question. What they're asking is, was Fatality as good as he was at fucking Quake as he is at Counter-Strike? Which obviously is a ridiculous question because, spoiler, he was at one point the best player in the whole world. So I'll say this. When I looked at the eye test, he looked like he had good aim. Like, he certainly had the aim for the game. But I know this. I also know he never, like, really loved Counter-Strike. So he sort of only did it as, like, a side thing. And he did think of it, unfortunately, a little bit like those side games, like Alien vs. Predator, that he did for a few months. He thought, like, if I put a few months in, I can be good. And it's like, dude, Counter-Strike isn't really like that. It's kind of like you have to be, like, all in on it. You have to do, like, years and years before you get all the experience. So give me your thoughts. Was it similar? Like, because I always felt like, look, you could have given him a chance, but I actually think some of the players in that team, maybe not Funk, but some of the other players were definitely better than him. Right?
Yeah, I think he had his moments. There were like maps where he was like the guy where it's like deagle rounds. He would just pop off. Like his deagle was really like, he was using like a railgun. He was the person that would just turn the round just right away, boom, 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 round turned around. So there were times like at the pre-CPL he popped off, and we're like, okay, maybe he could change the match for us in one way or another. But overall, Funk was probably the better player.
Okay, fair enough.
There were maps like he played really well. I think it was on Inferno. He popped off against one of the LG teams, and I was like, oh man, maybe we should just let him play Inferno sometimes. But he didn't get to play it, and that's kind of unfortunate.
One thing I never even noticed until I actually was just looking up while I was doing my interview with Fair, like the literal information, like his date of birth. It's like, dude, I forgot how young some of these people were. Like when Fair's in these teams, I think he was like 17 years old or something. Like at the time, I used to think, what a prick this guy is. He's like, no, he's just a 17-year-old kid who's just way too good at Counter-Strike. What do you expect? Mm-hmm. Everyone was like that back then, though, right?
Yeah, I mean that's how it was. Like especially the West Coast scene, because we would all just yell at each other, talk trash like big crazy on LAN, and that's just like it grew people's egos, like beating people, and it's like we were just like all. I was a little older, but I thought the same thing. These little punks, there's all this, all this stuff. Most of them just started up, like after 1.0 and stuff, and there were some of us like I was playing. I don't know if you remember, but I played in TDK back in like beta 4.2.
Fair play.
I played in like COH. I actually played on TDK with Moto.
Okay, which is funny because, by the way, low key, I don't think he was a fan of yours later, mate.
Oh no, we had.
He didn't get along with you at all.
He actually came to. There was a LAN that we went to, just me and two buddies, and Moto came to it like when we were in TDK. But we came between me and him, it was a pretty big rivalry after that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously, like as I said, I hinted at it before, but the transition now is, because this just shows, by the way, it ties into what you said about the breeding ground and how much talent came out of the NA scene. The joke was, you guys could have made top 8 with this really talented Forsaken squad with all this potential, but meanwhile, your sort of like side team that you play at LANs back home is secretly actually one of the best teams potentially in the world, because if people don't know, famously, when they had the CXG qualifier for the Cyberx games, it was going to be right after this CPL, the Forsaken CPL, to qualify to that, teams like NOA and the fucking Swedes with Vestlin, they were going to this going, it's going to be easy, there's 2 spots, you just play it. They were losing this fucking land to a local team, this Zero Respect. You guys were beating essentially one of the best teams, like sponsored teams in the world, just straight up on land. So those games must have made you realise, like this team, I have to play this team at some point, right? This has to be a real team.
Yeah, so at NOA and Adren
GX or whatever the fuck,
something like that. They came down they came down and boot camped, and like we would just go. It was at GamerX they would boot camp, and we would drive up there. Like we would drive an hour. Like we got to go play these guys. We got to go see how good they are. The Euros are there, and like obviously Medius and Destructo never got to play them at CPLs. We would just go and we would just destroy them during scrims. It was just like we would destroy them, and it wasn't even close. Like the first time we played, like they thought we were a joke. And we would just, I think I remember we played on CPL Mill against Vestlin's team and Quick and them. And they won pistol round, and then we bought Deagles the next round, and we just deagled them to hell. And then just ended up beating them like, 16-4 or something, I remember. And they just came up and they're like, oh man, this is, like, most of them were super cool about it, except for Vestlin. He was a pretty cocky guy, but most of them were like, geez, you guys are on another level. Can you guys we'll pay for you to come
You
back
became
out
like
here.
scrim partners, right?
Yeah, we'll pay for you to come back out here and scrim us again because that's obviously something they've never seen. Our level of aggression and the
For
way
context,
we
if people don't know, this team that he's talking about thrashing at the CPL came like 4th. Like they were like one of the best teams in the world.
Yeah, and people thought they were the best, and the NOA team obviously won a CPL, and they were stuff. But back to what you were saying, the CXG LAN, that's when we actually won our first LAN. Like we actually we won it, and it got overshadowed by the whole gun pulling thing at the event, and so no one really got to see that we popped off there.
Okay, so here's my next question, because I want to ask about a few specific players along the way. So one of them that I'd actually like to ask about is the aforementioned Fair. Now, I will say, this is something that happens, I'll tell you, because a lot of these reflections, you'll notice, I try to actually do it when people's careers are over, so you can get like all the cool stories and the info, and no one's got any like secrets they have to keep anymore. The only downside is this, even though it means they're more reflective, and it's really cool that people can... I will say, almost no one talks shit anymore in these interviews, because we're all men, aren't we? Like, we've all had our whole lives. Yeah. But back then, as I alluded to before, listen, I used to love watching Fair's POVs demos. He was a mega good player, but I tell you what, he was an absolute prick. Like, I don't think he's ever not talked shit to me the entire time I ever met him in real life. He was shit talking the whole time. Although I like you, I just learned, he's actually just from the West Coast. That's just like being polite if you're from Britain or something. Like who the fuck was this guy? Because he even alluded to this in his whole interview. If people don't understand, there's actually an element here that I try not to bring up because sadly, like, race and politics have just ruined all fucking conversations in the modern day. But actually the weird thing about that scene was, basically the scene was people who are Latin American or they're Asian American, etc. Like, it's actually very rare you'd have like essentially just like some white boy like him rock up out of Orange County and just be playing in a team. Like, so to me, he always looked like, wait a minute, what's he doing there? Like, so I always thought he had a weird vibe. So who was this guy?
Yeah, so he was like you said, it was most of the lands would be hosted in like the Asian areas. There was always just like the Asian PC bangs, and he actually grew up near a couple of them, and we really hated him. He was like our mortal enemy because before, like in the early Ascension days, we would go up and we would go head to head. We'd be talking shit nonstop, and he would, he won a couple lands, we won a couple lands. I remember he won a LAN in he won some LAN with our early Ascension team, and he just came up and just started talking so much shit to us, and we're like, oh, I'm gonna get that motherfucker. Like we really hated it. We're like, we're gonna fight about it. It was almost like to the point that we're gonna fight. But eventually he was friends with Haynes, I believe, because they grew up in the same area. And Haynes like, all right, we got to pick this guy up. And as much as I hated him, I was like, all right, it's going to be better for the team because Madrano was leaving. I think Madrano started like playing less, so we're like, okay, we'll grab Fear. And we weren't sure if Fear was going to join because, like I said, we were like on fighting terms with each other. But eventually, he just joined up, and it's like, okay, let's do it.
One thing that actually I think a lot of people are going to be surprised about, because this is a story I especially want to bring up with you, because I remember you were involved heavily with this, was because of this chance meeting where not only have you played Europeans at those pre-CPL lands like we talked about earlier, but you literally got to spend this time with the NOA players, the Adrenaline players, and you were even scrimming against them. Here's how I know actually that some of them did respect you, because spoiler, one of them, a player called Goodfella, got a girlfriend while he was out there. So he said, fuck it, I'll just stay out here. And he was playing with you guys for a while. So one of the things people don't know, I actually told the story differently and didn't mention this detail in the Fear interview. I told the story in the Fear interview about how the next big CPL, not the CPL, sorry, when the ESWC qualifier came around, actually nobody expected Rival would have any chance here. And as a result, him popping off is what got him that weird story where he joined Call for 1 week, but he didn't, and they just came straight back to you guys. And I said to him, right, the reason why I got why he joined Call for that week is because the team wasn't going to win at the time for two reasons. One, Destructo, as the aforementioned Destructo, was one of the best players on the team, and he'd been signed for NOA for that weird like eligibility rules to just cheat through the qualifier. And by the way, fuck you, because I actually ruined that guy's career and he stopped playing, so the guy was mega. So anyway, we'll put that to one side. And then the other one, this is the one that people don't get. The Goodfella guy wanted to stay and play these CPLs and stuff, but didn't something happen? Like he just had to go back to Europe and it just didn't work out. Like he just never came back over or something, right? Because you lost two of your best players, right?
Yeah, I think, I don't really remember what happened to Jonas. I remember he joined, he had to go back, or we couldn't pay for his flight back out, or for some reason.
Something like that,
we even tried to get people to, to donate to us and get him back out here. But Jonas was amazing. He was crazy good player. I can't remember why he couldn't come back out, though. But he did.
I think what you said is correct, that you couldn't pay for him to come. I mean, I know to fans now they're going to go, "What are you on about? It's only $600." No one had any sponsors back then. Who has $600 to spare, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, yeah, he played a lot of us in the zero respect lands, and he did pretty well. But yeah, the Destructo thing also. Not only did he join NOA and leave us, he joined
like a week before, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think it was 3 days before, and he knew like a month before.
Ah.
And we all knew Devin was like a good friend. We're like, Devin, like how would that, it was one of the another things you're like, we're gonna fight it, we're gonna fight at LAN because of this,
Yeah.
And he kind of screwed us over, but overall, I mean, it's hard to blame people when you look back these days.
Sure.
Like I said, we're 17, 16-year-old kids, and offered them a decent amount of money and a house to live in because NOA ended up having a house like right.
They had real funding,
school,
yeah, and obviously
yeah.
some of the best players in the world. You can play with like fucking Element, who just won all the CPLs and that. Like, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, in the end, you can't really blame him, but at the time, we're like, okay, this guy's a bastard. But
it's basically, yeah, go on.
Yeah, but I mean, after him leaving, I think is when our team really started to pop off. Not that he was the problem, but we brought in someone who had a little more experience, Exodus.
Yes.
And I mean, he was in his own right played the first CPL where we got third. He popped off really hard in a lot of the matches. So,
in light of the context of the story, like I set up about the rival days, that you were like at the tail end of the bad rival, basically, and then you made the good one. But even then, like some of the good players get stripped out. It's not a team, by the way, that has big money. Like obviously, rivals just like a fucking LAN cafe or whatever.
Yeah.
Like when you go to this first CPL, the summer one, which timeline wise, if people like this ASWC's qualifier, I'm going to say is like what, a month? Like it was a month or two before the CPL, so it's not like there's tons of time. Like again, expectations are. Like if you put it this way, if you had the same result 9 to 12, that fans would probably say that's a good result. So the idea you could come third again. I tried telling the story, so I won't do the whole thing again. Basically, back then, unless you're the absolute elite NA team, the expectation for even the second and third and fourth best is like if you crack top 8. Job done. That's all you have to do. Europeans are better than us. Nobody does that. So if you're third place, that actually implies you're in the mix to win the event. So what happened at this must have been a pretty epic sort of like moment. If you've seen all the CPLs go bad for these rival teams, you were in one of them, and then you're suddenly in the mix of like upper bracket finals, or you're competing to still maybe go to the finals. Like, this must be a bit of a change, right?
It was a change, but at the same time, I felt like we were definitely going there to win. There was no one on our team, even with the prior stuff, that's like, okay, we're going to go here, we're going to play this 9 to 12. Anything below top 5 would have been, I think, a disaster for us because how well we played at LANs. We even won the joke again. We won the pre-CPL boot camp. We destroyed all the teams, and everyone's like, oh, the rival curse is going to happen. The rival curse, and yeah, that CPL we actually lost to Team Die very
really early
on.
in the upper bracket. Yeah,
and they're probably one of the worst because we played them so often.
They're like your scrim partners, right? In SoCal or something, right?
Yeah. So if there's any team we didn't want to play, it was them. And they ended up beating us on train, I believe, and then sent us into the lower bracket really early, and we had to beat like 5-6 teams of like D Skyline, Titans.
Loads of good teams.
Yeah, like Titans just won ESWC, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. So the first team he played was either D Skyline or Titans. I think it was Titans in the lower bracket on Nuke.
You played D Skyline in the third place match, so yeah, you did.
Okay, yeah. So Titans, we after we beat them, like our confidence just because we kind of destroyed them. It was up to the point like we were beating them so bad on Nuke that I almost knifed one of them in the back, and X just was like, no, please, It's
okay.
And so I mean that just got our confidence pretty high back again, and we were just started rolling. I can't think of the team after Titans, but it was another team, maybe Mouse Sports.
Could be, yeah.
And then then there was a D Skyline team, and then SK, the huge triple overtime on Clan Mail, which was that was hard to. I can still think of Medius. I had like 0.2 seconds to defuse, and if he would have defused, we would have won the match. And
shall I tell you the detail that'll trigger you, mate? I remember the very last round of this game. Potty, who was one of the best clutch players ever, won like a 1v3 with 1 health.
Yep.
It's just like, listen, if I'm going to lose and get eliminated from the fucking tournament, not a guy with 1 health just kills you in 1v3. Like, that feels like you're in the final at that point. You're like, I'm in the final now, aren't I?
Yeah, there were that and the Medius thing were both things like, oh my god, but it's one of those things. I mean, that's why they're the greatest players there are, right? Heat and Potty and them. It's hard to be mad about losing to them, even in the way we did. And obviously, the triple overtime we got way more after that. The whole CPL boot camp or the BYOC, which had a couple thousand people. I don't remember how big it was, but it was pretty big. Everyone we came out and everyone was like USA rival.
It's like the heroes return, right?
Yeah. So it was even though we lost pretty disheartening way, it was still like a good CPL overall, I think. And after
Oh yeah, go on.
I was gonna say after that we came back online and everyone was calling us fluke and stuff still. So it was more like it gave us
of course.
We were a team of we loved when people would talk shit to us and consider us underdogs because we would just grind harder. We never thought of us, like we said, everyone on the team. We knew that we could be the best in the world after the CXG and winning all the lands and stuff. So to us, it was just more of like a push for us to get better.
Right. One of the things I wanted to ask was this: even though you had the local LAN scene to play at back home, like we mentioned, the big problem in NA was the two big tournaments that existed were the TPLs, basically, because you guys weren't flying to Europe to play, in Sweden and Germany. You weren't unfortunately, this is another aspect people don't mention why Europeans are better. They had a professional circuit, they weren't just playing every 6 months and just hoping this lineup works out. Like some of the NA teams that played only online were idiots, mate. You can't just wait 6 months and then find out this guy sucks on LAN. We're at the LAN. That's like half of our fucking year. So my question for you is, even though you had the local LANs back home, how do you keep motivation when it's right, I've got to wait 6 months for the next crack at this? You want it to be next week,
I mean, it was pretty hard for us. I don't know. Once NOA and Adren came down to the SoCal, it made things a little better because we'd be getting world level talent playing nonstop. But the SoCal scene, after we started winning a lot, it did get a little, people's egos got a little better, and it's we don't need to go to this one. Let's just, we don't need to practice. It's just Cal-I. Who cares, Or, from every day to, 5 times a week to 3 times a week. And I feel like that happened to most teams that, hit the top. They'd be like, we're just better than the rest. We don't need to practice. And... But come CPL time, everyone would just get back in the mode of, all right, it's grind time every day. And yeah.
I've got a question for you that might be a little bit touchy, so we'll see how you answer it. It's not to you, but to other people. We'll see what you want to say about it. Right, I can just tell you straight up, Masternook. Players who were Cal-I players have admitted to me at the time, and especially since, some of them just said, I cheated, of course. Because first of all, people don't know there was no anti-cheat, and... You're just playing for bragging rights anyway. So some of them would even use the logic, as fucked as this logic is. So I just hated that guy, so fuck it. I used wall hacks and I won the game. And the joke is, this is the key point I want to hit though, Master, because no fans got this back then. Some of these guys were really good LAN players, by the way. These weren't just, people always thought it's a guy who can't play. No, what you don't know is if a real LAN player who is proven uses the cheats, you can never know he's doing it. And he's going to use them smart and he's going to use it to win the 1v2. He's not going to fucking use it every round and shoot you through a wall with an AWP. So all I'll say is, not only do I know people did, but this is why I want to ask you. I personally suspect that that's what ruined the Cal Invite competitions, because I have to say, when your team was amazing, when 3D was still one of the best teams in the world, you guys weren't fucking winning Cal Invite. Meanwhile, the people who would win Cal Invite was look, the worst one ever was the late version. This is years later, when the Weekend Warriors were none of the original players. When they won, that was dude, this has to be cheating. These guys wouldn't even win a local LAN if you guys went and played them. So I want to ask you, what do you think about Cal Invite in that sense? How legitimate was the competition? Do you ever feel like you were getting cheated?
Oh, 100%. I mean, even playing against 3D, I thought I was always suspect of them because obviously they hated us really bad.
The joke, I can tell you because I knew them, is they would have, some of them of them would have thought you might be cheating against them because you can't be as good as them. Therefore, that is how they would justify if they did something against you. All I'll say is that would be the logic that might go through there.
Oh, yeah, I'm 100%. Like I said,
as bad as that is, I know, for a professional team as well.
Like I said, Moto and myself had a pretty deep rivalry. And there was a couple times I even called him out in interviews, and people were like, "Oh, you can't. That's Moto. That's 3D Moto." And I was like, "That is Moto, but he hates me enough to where he wants to win." And Moto was a guy who's do anything to win.
Sure.
He had the mentality of they would always get the best servers. We would get the ping against 3D.
I told the story about, listen, I didn't say who it was, but I told the story against Fear that some NA players, when you were doing the ping selection, would just pull the internet cable out really fast and put it back in so it looked like it was spiking and they would go, you can't play here, there's a bloody packet loss. And then the joke is, when you get onto their server, magically everything's great, isn't it? You have double the ping.
Yeah. I mean, 3D and then later Complexity were the biggest jokes to play against online. They all lived in Texas and would get like 5 pings.
Right.
So
yes.
Even though for California playing on Chicago servers it was the worst of the worst. The registry on Chicago servers for some reason was just abysmal. But we had to play one half on Texas, and then we would have, for some reason we couldn't play one half of California because 3D, they could choose everything. They get to do we had to do one half on Chicago. So yeah, playing against 3D and Complexity online was horrific. And, we would still, a lot of us were like, whatever, this isn't that big of a deal. But back to the online cheating thing. Kali, there was one point we even tried to make with Goki and the tech guys, we tried to make a Cal invite. We called it the council.
Oh, and, right. To review who's cheating from the demos or something, right?
Yeah, and the cheats were passed around to all of us so that we could see through the walls. And the rule was if someone was thought of cheating, all of us on the council would get their demo and we would all watch it cheating and review it. And, we would discuss with the captain of the team, why would he make this play? Why would he make this play? And we brought it to the Kali anti-cheat team, and they're like, oh, this is a joke. What do you guys think? Of course we're not going to do this. And so we still ran it for a while, and then eventually we played against Tech on CPL Mill, I believe. And one of their players popped off. So I'm like, let's just run the council. Let's just run this one time so let's see how it is. And they just wouldn't go with the demos. I'm like, all right. That's you're just opening Pandora's box right now because you're not going to attest to what we're doing and you're not going to try to work with us. So I think after that happened, I think that is when people just started popping off cheating nonstop in Kali.
By the way, since you mentioned you had this rivalry with the Mortal, I didn't know the backstory, but I definitely knew the Mortal side of it. Don't worry about that. All I'll say is this. There's even an epic photo that got frag took back in the day where when you guys beat them at a CPL, because everyone used to still do the handshake like fucking hockey or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
There's a photo where they must have taken where you do a whole load, you take 100 so you can get one. And they took a shot where I even joked, listen, he was even a mate of mine, but I was like, dude, this shot is it's like your soul's being taken because I think he's shaking your hand, but he's doing it he's the most defeated look ever, and he's just putting his hand out limply,
Yeah, that was my favorite photo for a long time. Yeah, that was my favorite photo for a long time. Yep, I know exactly which one you're talking about. It's so good. It's so good.
Because here's the thing, though, and people are going to think we're just telling stupid stories here. Back then, look, the money's cool, but when you divide it all up, it's not that fucking much. For real, the reason you play is to be the best, and especially beat people who you fucking don't like. It's bragging rights, right?
Bragging rights. Well, it's the main thing. For people that don't know, the CPL scandal with Angel, I don't think I got paid for any of my third place CPLs. And the third,
shit, okay.
Yeah, I don't. Obviously, I don't know if you remember that Gary Sanchez stole all the money from NOA.
Oh, that's why. Yes, sure. Yes, yeah.
I think Angel stole the first year, and then Gary stole the 2 other years along with some WEG money or something. But even after all that money being stolen, it was still, like you said, it was still about the pride and being the best, and that's why we just grinded. It wasn't about the money, really.
Maybe we should touch on that briefly, because Fear brought it up briefly, but I noticed he didn't want to talk too much about it. He just mentioned the same thing as the guy stole the money. Here's the problem, right? Because back then, media, look, I was a journalist back then, and guess what? None of us had journalism degrees. We were just guys who were fucking banging stuff on the internet. We were trying to figure it out like you guys were as pros, we were just learning our craft. So I will say back then, there was no fucking investigation into this. There was no oh my God, we're going to get to the bottom of this. What happened was, some players came forwards and said, he stole the prize money. By the way, spoiler, if you're a fan of any of NOA, that's the reason those great players left those teams and went to Team 3D and fucking all. Because they didn't get any fucking money. They were winning tournaments and getting nothing. So what I'll say is this. What made it so that people were somehow unsure if he stole the money was, if you remember, later there was a CPL when Method was on 3D. And somehow, he turned up and he tried to claim, this is an illegal playing. I have Method under contract. And it's here's what's weird. Fear alluded to this. I wanted to ask about this. It's somehow, even people he'd stolen from, some of them actually wouldn't come out against him, though, dude. It's he almost was he was like Littlefinger. He had some sort of his hooks in him, and somehow emotionally he could even get some people who, no joke, they were there when somebody stole the money, and it's like they wouldn't even come forwards for themselves. They would sort of still almost be on his side. Well, it's Gary, you know, I don't know. He said that it's late and it's going to come. Like, what do you think about this scenario? 'Cause it was a very weird situation, right? You stole a lot of money, potentially.
He stole a lot of it. I'm pretty sure he stole about $90,000 overall. Yeah, most of it, like a lot from NOA. There was the 2 CPLs and the 2 WEGs, right? And yeah, like he was a good friend he was a really good friend of all of us. I mean, he lived at WG with us, obviously. He lived in the NOA house. He was a good friend of all the rival guys. We all just hung out with him all the time. Just no one thought anything, you know. It's like, oh, the money's going to come late. Okay, you know, he keeps the first CPL. We're at WEG. The money will come late. Keeps the second.
And it did used to get paid late. I will say back then, you know, it would take like a few months to come. So it was a plausible story, right?
Yeah, it definitely was. And then it started coming really late, and him and Ola Element, you know, they got
Wasn't it implied they were sort of partying a bit, maybe with the money?
Oh yeah, they were partying a little. Yeah.
Should have been getting. I'll say it very carefully like that, but you know what I mean.
Oh yeah,
you know exactly what I mean. Not in a very subtle way either, right?
No, not in a subtle way.
It's like, dude, you're spending my money, obviously. What the fuck is this? You know.
And then so yeah, even after knowing like they're like okay, they're partying pretty hard. They went to. We asked for the money. He's like, oh, it's gonna come. And both him and Element went to Amsterdam. Took a month-long trip to Amsterdam.
Like, I mean, okay. that tells you all you need to know about what I was alluding to. Just
yep. And after that, we didn't see him again. So that was the end of it. We're like, okay, all right, money's gone.
That's good.
And that's it. You know, the Amsterdam trip. Him and Ola. Yeah, they. Yep, that's where our money went.
Listen, all I'm going to say is they got their money's worth out of it.
Oh, yeah.
No one else did, you know. Here's the question, though. The last question on that topic before we move back to the players is this. Since, as you say, this is where humans are way too complicated for stories and for the way you present it in media. As you said, I'm glad you characterised it that way very fairly. This guy wasn't actually like an obvious like dodgy businessman. It's like, oh, what are we doing? Oh, we were too young. No, he actually was all of these people's friend. He was actually a classic example of the manager, because the manager back then wasn't like a true business guy. This guy who knew a little bit about business, and he'll just take care of this stuff because you guys are playing. And I remember he was very friendly to everyone. He definitely had charisma. That's how he did all this shit. So my question is this. How much of it do you think was he on some level, could he like compartmentalize it and be a cool guy, and was another part of him like a sociopath, like, I'm going to steal everything? Or do you think, for example, like he just realized, like, I'll give you an example. Let's say someone told me like, oh, look after this $10,000 and I'll ask for it again in 2 years. The premise here would be, if I think I can get it back in 2 years, and I want to spend it now, like I could take a bit out now and I could always pay it back. Like, was it some of that? Like, do you think he always intended to steal?
I don't think he always intended to steal. Like I said, he was definitely a really good friend to a lot of us. Like he, for the years, even before like the money came, even before the money started coming in, he was just a really good friend. He was part of the rival crew that was, we had no money, you know. And the story from his point of view was that he got, he paid for the NOA house, and he didn't get paid back by Intel or Nvidia or something, so he took some of the money.
Okay.
And then, you know, I could see like taking a little part, and then I think they just started partying a little too hard, like we said before, and it just never stopped. You just okay, we're gonna take a little money, just $5,000. You know, let's just go have some fun. Oh, there's another 5,000, another 5,000, another 10,000. This month we're gonna spend on just drugs and just whatever we want to do. And yeah, I think it just got to him, and he just got caught up into it. And eventually, you know, he got lost in it. He turned into a completely different guy. And like pretty much no one ever saw him again. And Fear and I and some other guys looked him up this year or last year, and now he's like a, you know, God first Christian.
Of course.
Forget, you know, and it's like, come on, man, you are just, you know, for God first, you sure didn't even apologize to any of us, or we never saw the money again. So.
Right, when you went to this next CPL then, as we've set the stage, in the between time, there's not really anything going on, especially as a weird detail we won't bother going into because it's just a boring story is, even when 3D was whack, it's almost like they were allowed to use cheats at those fucking World Cyber Games qualifiers. Why did they just win every single one of those? Like, even when Complexity was the best, 3D still won. Like, somehow the one tournament they would always win is the World Cyber, which is in between sort of CPL Summer and CPL Winter. So basically, CPL Winter is the only other tournament to realistically do something at, right? So when you came to this next one, the third place, this was another one where there was a chance to win this tournament. Oh, go on, have a listen.
CPL, the WCGs.
Yeah, give me your thoughts.
So, like, I like to joke that 3D's best players were Torble and Laurent. If you remember who Laurent is,
the admin, the main admin. If people don't know,
Yep.
he was definitely in sort of. It's like if people don't know, the joke would be like this. I'll give you an analogy everyone will understand. If LeBron is playing in a basketball game, is he going to get more fouls from the famous referees, or is he going to get punished like a rookie? He's obviously going to get all the fucking star treatment. We all know that, right?
Yeah. So the WCG in Orange County, I remember there was a good set of computers. There was a shuttle set of computers. Obviously, back then, all the computers were not equal at these LANs.
Yes.
So there was one set of computers that were just insane, and they gave them to the first seed. 3D played on them the first set versus us, and we beat them 13-11, I think, on Dust 2. And the next set, it was supposed to go to the high seed, which was us, because we obviously beat them. They came back through the lower bracket, came back, and so we go to set up on them, and then like we're already full set up on them, and then Torble comes out and it's like, "Hey, you guys are, these are 3D computers." And I'm like, "You're joking, right?" Obviously I was gonna have a, that's a nicer way to say it, but eventually Moto came out, Moto, Torble, and we got in this big old argument. I'm like, let's just fucking rock paper scissors for it. Fuck you. Let's just rock paper scissors for it. Even though these are our computers, we're gonna we'll do it. Boom! I win the rock paper scissors. Eventually, we get up to play. We're in the server, and Laurent comes up. Like, Mark, you either get off those computers or you just disqualified from the tournament. And that was not only like that was pretty much like a mind fucking us. They're pretty good at that. Where we were like, pistol rounds counting down, and it's like, all right, close the thing down. Either get off the computers or you're just done from the tournament. And they beat us and on the shuttles. And that was
the sad thing is, if people don't know, these are stories you could only ever have heard behind the scenes if you literally knew Masternook or you're friends with the player. Because the sad thing is, even though websites exist, I named some of the names earlier, websites existed that all pretend, we have the ESPN of Counter-Strike. Like, there's no fucking guy who's coming and telling your story. By the way, back then they wouldn't even have told it, mate, because then they'd have got no Team 3D interviews, would they? Like,
Yeah.
So the joke is, even when people steal your money, fuck you over at the games, you have to essentially just go, oh, well, I mean, it's not, to me, back then, esports was more like fucking pool hustling, mate. It's like, you just hope you get out there with the money and they don't beat your ass or something, you know what I mean? Like, it was the Wild West.
Yeah. And that wasn't even the most egregious one. There was one time in, where I was on Pandemic, this is years later on Pandemic, at WSBG, Kentucky. At the time, I had a surgery that clipped my vocal cord, so I had zero voice at the time. Like, the most I could muster was like this. I could talk right here. There was like a whole year of that. And so Pandemic as a team, we won. We went to the whole winners bracket. We beat 3D. And it's grand finals time the next day. And it's finals time for all the games. There is Guitar Hero finals. There's this all like
I can see where this is going.
So the whole tournament we're using Mumble because in-game is kind of, dodgy. No one could hear my voice in-game. And so Guitar Hero's popping off. We load up Mumble. And they're like, hey, you can't load that up. What are you doing? Like, what are you talking about? You use it through the whole tournament. Laurent's like, okay, this is the finals, though. There's no other third-party programs on the finals. That's been a rule. And we're like, oh my, this is some bullshit. So, obviously, we had to use in-game during the final where Guitar Hero's popping off and I have no voice. We end up losing. And, they win the whole thing. We end up losing. And I go over to their computers, check it out. They all have Mumble open. So, Laurent was their best player, I would say.
He was doing some heavy lifting in these stories.
Oh, yeah.
It's fucking,
sure.
It's not like he wins the games from, but he certainly puts them in. He gives them a little head start, let's say that.
Yeah.
Gives them a little head start.
Sure.
There you go.
And it's not like I don't blame any of the players. I feel like the players didn't even know about a lot of this stuff. Torble and Laurent would just set it up and, they would just play their game and they're like, yeah, they're just playing so much worse for some reason. I just don't know why. And it's like, well, And
it goes without saying, by the way, listen, even though Laurent was actually a CPL admin, you can't pull that shit at the CPL.
No, exactly.
That's why at the CPL they were never as good, right? There was a few years where they would win the World Cyber Games or go in the final, then they go to the CPL, they'd be like 9th place or something, right?
Yep, that could definitely be one of the reasons. I mean, I don't really remember what happened, like who they lost to in a lot of the CPLs. Obviously, they lost to us in one of them.
U5 at one.
Yeah.
It might be hard. It wasn't even the best teams they were losing to, so it was sad.
Yeah.
They clearly had some problems at that point,
Yeah.
Right, okay, here's the thing. I'll set you up for this. if you come third at another CPL Masternook, even though if you're a shit NA guy, it's like, wow, you make third sound like you won the tournament. Oh my God, and we were beating this team. If you come third like you described here, it's really, you get to have a morning, right? Because, spoiler, the same thing happened. You were playing a game super close with NOA. They win the tournament. Like, again, it's the same thing that you were close to, again, being in a final. But you could maybe even have won it, right?
Yep.
And this was the one that SK didn't attend, so famously it was the one that everyone thought was wide open. And in fact, let's add it in again. Give us the context. Wasn't this another one where like the pre-season, pretty sweet, I'll even tell you, I was friends with Shagwar, Element, all those guys. They even told me, I remember Shagwar told me at the the LG tournament, the pre-boot camp that we're talking about, this tournament where they had to have a competition LAN. He even told me at that one, like, because they weren't winning that shit. He was telling me, like, dude, I think we don't win this team. Probably just break the whole team up. Like I don't even know if we're good right now. Like, are we good? We have to, let's hope so. People don't know. This was the most wide open CPL ever. So what were your thoughts on this one, if you can remember some stories?
I mean, it was pretty, I think we won the pre-CPL again. We won that one. And there was NOA and stuff. And I do remember Shagwar, he would come in our room quite often because they were having a lot of internal problems. They were having, we were pretty good friends with all of them. There was a lot of internal problems between Shagwar, there was a Russian guy that was on the team. I can't think of his name.
Russian? No. They had like, I mean, if you remember, it was like Norwegian players. Do you mean Nikon, the little Norwegian player?
No, not Nikon.
Surely not.
Nikon, no,
yeah,
no.
Knoxville, maybe? No, he was not on the team anymore at this point in
time.
Who are we talking about here? Let me think. I'm trying to think. Because the thing is, NOA was like Shagwar. Fucking hell, you're going to test my memory here. Let me think who else it was.
Shagwar, Nikon.
Executor? He was Norwegian as well.
It
was like a half Korean or whatever. Method was obviously on the team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who this Russian guys we're referring to here. Who's this? Maybe he was part of the organization or something. No. It was Shagwar, Method, Executor, Nikon, and Element. That was their team.
Oh yeah. Okay, that was the team. Who was that? Maybe that was a different CPL thing. But there was a problem with a Russian guy who was really good, and Shagwar. And for some reason, maybe that was the CPL before. And anyway. But they would always come to the room and like, just spilling their drama, and like they were like fighting. And Executor and Ola, they were very butting heads. They were just really strong headed. But yeah, I mean, we won the pre CPL again, and like I said, there was we played NOA all the time in SoCal. They, like we said, kind of like screen partners. So there wasn't a time where it was like, oh, these guys are just much better than us. Like I said, we were there to win the event once again. The only team who won that event, was it NOA?
NOA won it, yes. The top teams, the teams in the finals, NOA, and then they had the Eyeballers team that had brought like different players from the one before. They brought like Valle and Bullen and all those. It was like a super team of Swedish players, yeah.
Yeah, and Eyeballers is the only team where I felt like they beat us, and it's like, damn, they were supposed to be amazing in scrims. Everyone said they were going to win the CPL, I think. Yeah, they beat us on train, I believe, and it's like, whoa, we were not ready for that. We just weren't ready for them at all. That was the only time ever I felt in a match where like we were not ready or prepared for a team in the way that they beat us. But like playing NOA and stuff, I forgot what map we lost to them on, but it was close. Yeah, it was losing to them is like kind of disheartening also because they're friends and like scrim partners, and we'll go home and they're gonna like just talk shit nonstop.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, okay, I've got a question for you, actually, which goes like this. I want to ask about another player. So you mentioned him earlier. Haynes was the player where, actually, he used to always get all the love from the fans for some reason. Like, he's the one that everyone's, oh, my God. He was like the fucking popular kid in school. And also, he didn't do interviews, so he's all mysterious and shit, So who was this guy? Because obviously, people might not know this. In your team, he had this incredible like fan support, and he obviously was a very good player if you watch the POVs. But actually, if people remember, his career ended on a really sour note, because after CGS, he came back in that complexity team or whatever. But it was Evil Genius, if you remember, and they just booted him after like a few months and said he was like the problem or whatever. And then, so as a result, people don't. I don't know if old full fans remember as well. Who was Haynes then? Because you knew him very well, obviously.
Haynes was. I mean, there was times, many like times where he was just by far the best player in the world. We first saw him at one of the SoCal LANs. He was pretty local to Fear and in Irvine.
Wasn't he very young as well? Wasn't he like 16 at the time, like the Zero Respect era, right? He was like, he's too young to go to CPLs, I think, wasn't he?
Too young to go to CPLs, yeah. And everyone knew that everyone in SoCal knew he was just the best. His movement, there's that clip on against EG on Inferno where he's jumping up through the boxes and just no-scope someone or something like that. Like that was just him. Like he was like a very just like free mind, and there was nothing like. He was like a like no mind, that whole saying, just clear your mind. And he would just flow. You would just see him, and he was just flowing through the map. Just headshotting, bunny hopping. It felt like he was playing like 1.0 when it was 1.6, just the way he moved. But yeah, he was, and I think everyone just thought, everyone in NA thought he was best in the world. Even the NOA guys were like, okay, this guy is just a demon. I remember there were a couple times where we were playing 3D, and 3D was looking. This was before Volcano joined, maybe. Okay. They were looking to maybe pick him up, and like Moto like asked me, he's like, "Hey, what do you think of like even Moto even asked me, even though like thing, he's like, hey, can you give me a couple demos of Haynes?" And I was like, "Fuck off! Like, who the fuck are you talking to right now?" Like, And but yeah, I mean Haynes, no doubt about it, one of the best. I think around CGS though, he kind of stopped caring. He didn't really like Source, even though the movement was extremely fun. Yeah, he just started stopped caring. And there was the EG thing. They moved. I kind of remember the EG thing. They moved in together. Was Nothing on the team?
Yes, he was like the main player. They built the team around. Yeah, him and Ford.
Yeah. So I remember there was this whole thing about the house was dirty, and like because I was pretty close friends with all of them, and they would like hit me up with all these at the time I was kind of like the oldest, so people would hit me up about what can we do about this, etc. And all of them would hit me up and it's like, oh, this guy's so dirty. He won't pick up this. He just wants to sit in his room and play like WoW, or he's playing WoW nonstop, or
has he just given up on life in a sense?
I think it got to the point where they were all making each other so mad that he was just like, fuck this team. I'm just gonna go off and play WoW, because they're just butting heads in person. Kind of like how we kind of similar to our story in WG. A lot of us butted heads.
Yes.
So it's like, fuck this. I'm just gonna go play World of Warcraft while you practice all day. I'm not going to go practice with you. Fuck you then. It's kind of like, I felt like that happened with a lot of teams. So yeah, his downfall was kind of bad, but still coming out through before CGS era, he was, best player in the world for a long, long time.
Actually, when I mentioned that detail there, I remembered he was too young to play in the CPL. That's actually the detail I forgot when I was characterising it earlier. That was also why the Zero Respect team couldn't be a team at the time, because I know Haynes was like slightly too young. I think maybe even, because if people don't know, this is weird, the first CPLs actually didn't have like the limitation or something, but then I think it's like 2003 or something, they made it where you had to like, if you were like 17 or 16, you had to have like either a parent's like written consent, or you just couldn't play, I think, if you were 16. So I remember famously, like Medias had to miss a few CPLs as well, and he obviously also was another player. So I want to ask about this player. I explained it to Faye in my interview with him as Medias, first of all, was one of the only players on your team who didn't talk shit, because spoiler, he like never talked as far as I could tell. He's really quiet. He was like the stereotype of the shy Asian American nerd kid who him and Bombs like definitely did all their fucking homework and all the chores, and then they played CS. That's my joke, Whereas obviously you guys are more like the guys who are like, look, we're going to win this LAN and then we might kick your ass outside afterwards. Like, it's a different vibe, So there was him, and as a result though, and this says everything about the politics back then, dude, he was the other player that hit 3D was always so horny to sign, because obviously he never shit talked them, so they just were able to like not be biased and just see like he was a really good player. So who was this guy? Because he's another player where, because he never did media and stuff, ironically for his name, he actually never really got the shine. I never thought people knew how good he was. Wasn't he like a mega clutch player or something? Oh,
he was just like a sleeper. He was just like always, you could just always rely on, like we would all go do our own thing, like, oh, rotate A, just leave Medias B on Inferno. And you didn't have to worry about B, we would just do our own thing. Like, so he was one of those players, I feel like he was very like kind of like Nikon. You just 100% trust in the guy no matter what. He did his part. He would show up to practice. He wouldn't put much like input in. He would just like, okay, Mike, we need you to go here and do this. And he's like, okay. There was never a pushback on anything. It was always just like, I got it. We're here. And he was, he's been in the SoCal scene forever. He was part of GX and WEW. Yes. And I don't know why GX never, picked him up more. Like, I'm not sure why he came to our team. Maybe because the GX...
He was on GX briefly, but I think he was only on it like a show. I think he was on it when Method was on it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the team was crazy. Like
for sure.
And I'm not sure why they never picked him up. But as soon as like he was off GX, we're like, okay, we got to pick this guy up, obviously, because he's we play him on lands, and like he's a problem to go against all the time. And yeah, he's just worldwide. Yeah, he probably never got the attention he deserved, but he was insane. Yeah. One of the top American players for sure.
just as a piece of trivia, so that earlier section, because I'm not going to cut it because it was interesting. Like, obviously, you made your comments. I can't edit it like fucking Homer Simpson. So actually, he didn't have a problem with the Russian guy. I've remembered the story now. It was revenge. It was from when he was in Zexton.
Yes.
And basically, the story is, I can't say the full story because I actually like Shagwell. I don't want to tell story. Basically, they basically had a fight, like a full-on fight, as far as I know. So I'm sure a past CPL that just blew up completely. Okay, just so we can complete the story, we don't have to keep remembering. That was a different team, though. Because I was wondering, when the fuck has he ever played a Russian player? The reason why is this dude, it's because his family, like, emigrated to Canada or something. So I'm my brain didn't think. Because I was thinking, when would a Russian ever be at CPL? They were. Yeah, put that to one side. He was basically considered Canadian in a sense, even though, by the way, did not have citizenship. Interesting detail, right? So let's go on. And this is the next part, right? You've set it up already. You've done back-to-back top threes CPLs both times.
Back to the one. I got to finish the revenge.
Oh, sorry,
I remember it was revenge.
Yeah,
I remember him busting into the room when Shagwell was hanging out with us, grabbing the phone, and just like attacking him with it. But that's just like
I didn't want to tell that story, but that is supposedly the story. Yeah. Because essentially they just had such a big argument. Yeah, he just beat his head in with a fucking phone.
Yeah.
It sounds like some other movie, like a fucking hangover movie. This is real. This is what I'm back. And again, if you're a fan, it wasn't a professional sport. Like back then, no one's going and telling someone to call the police. You just go, oh, well, I don't know, fucking wipe your eye and just get on with the game, like, you know. And obviously you're not in this team anymore. That's that, you know. I think we've resolved that. Like, this is the world back then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadju, Iskander, Matt Pugnatio Rakula, Toucan, Travis Goff, Adam Oaks, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Hades, J-Dubs, Jensen Gore, Joy, Joseph Ginsberg, Kovacevic, Tobias Bernasconi, Zumba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks goes out as always to Jerky's Minion, but also to Jeremy Dole. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want to ask me a question for one of my video AMAs? Want teasers? Find out who the guests are. Would you like to take part in a lengthy esports discussion with me? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.